The Saudi Arabian Grand Prix then, not exactly a banger of a race. I'd put it firmly in the meh section of the banger race-o-meter, which I've just made up. It wasn't dreadful by any stretch, but if you're watching the battle for 14th place with 8 laps left, as we all were on the world feed, then it's not been a cracker. Sorry, actually, I've just realised I look a bit like a Bond villain in this chair this week. I can tell you, though, that it's certainly not a cat that I'm stroking down there. It's a teddy bear. Come on, get your mind out of the gutter. Yeah, so not great from the track layout that I use to eat cornflakes. Turn 4 to turn 10 really do make a lovely handle for a spoon. And if you're looking at that picture thinking, where's the milk in those cornflakes? I completely agree with you. But sadly, the only milky cereal images that I could find on the internet were these absolute horrors, which you can only get in America, and for good reason. There is 40% of your recommended daily sugar intake in a 30-gram serving. There's less sugar in sugar. Anyway, we're going to roll the clock all the way back to Wednesday to start this Grand Prix review. Well, that's because of Ferrari, who were taking L's so early this weekend that they nearly made it into my Bahrain race review video. An electric component replacement meant that Charles Leclerc needed to take a 10-place grid penalty, but on the plus side, his car did actually work this weekend. On to Thursday, Ferrari were taking more L's actually, as Verstappen announced that he had recovered from a stomach bug and was able to race this weekend. It really does look as though gastroenteritis is going to offer more opposition for the title this season than any team will.
Gastroenteritis.
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 On to Friday then, and this was a legitimate document actually published by the FA in an unironic way, asking Lewis Hamilton to report to them for wearing jewellery. I hope the FIA don't watch this actually, because I've got a watch on, so I'll probably get cancelled for that or something. Also on Friday, Ferrari were taking more L's. They were 0.7 seconds off the Red Bull pace. In fact, you know what? I'm actually just not going to mention any more Ferrari L's, just like, if the day ends in a Y, Ferrari are taking L's. On to qualifying, and it was happy birthday to my crack, 51 on Saturday. Esteban Ocon on Saturday, though, well, he was very nearly Esteban ocoff, because he did hit the wall twice, but ended up getting 6th on the grid for Alpine, which is pretty impressive, so good for him. But the big talking point from qualifying was that it was Max Verstapoff in the end, as his Red Bull car broke down in Q2, leaving him 15th on the grid for the race. Would he recover well to a strong finishing position? Yes. Just before we get into the race though, I watch on Sky. Does anyone know where I could get access to all the onboard footage during the race? I've not seen it advertised at all. They've not spoken about anything where I could watch the onboard footage. So if anyone could help with that, please just leave a comment. So on to the race, and I feel like after 2 races this season, it calls for a little lesson, for the driver's benefit really, in where to position your car for the start of a race. Because this has happened twice now. Alonso and Ocon have both been penalised for being in the wrong position. What we're demonstrating on the screen right now is the correct position for your F1 car at the start of a Grand Prix. So it's not there. It's not there, and it's definitely not there, okay? That is not right. Don't put your car there. Unfortunately, though, Alonso did put his car there and got himself a penalty for it. So it got a bit of criticism on Twitter, actually. But I don't really understand it. I mean, the grid boxes are very clear. It's not a difficult rule to follow. Just do it. The first stage of the race largely played out as you would expect, but Ferrari actually made a good strategy call, and I genuinely do feel a bit sorry for them on this one. They put all of their eggs in the no safety car basket on the safety car roulette table. Unfortunately for them, the FIA, otherwise known as Ferrari International Assassination, called a safety car out for Lance Stroll's car, which was showing on track according to the GPS. Unfortunately for the GPS, the car was actually there. So what that meant was that Ferrari were thrown down a creek without a paddle because everyone else got a very cheap pit stop. Kind of awkward for the FIA. If they had checked out Sky's new onboard camera service, they would have clearly seen that Stroll's car was not on the track. Why they're relying on the GPS data and not what they can actually see is anyone's guess. But we're not going to get too bogged down in calling the FIA clowns just yet. we'll save that for slightly later, because it was during this safety car that Alonso took his pit stop and his penalty, and we all lived happily ever after. Nope, it all kicked off, and we will come back to that later. But after the safety car, it was Alex Albon who was forced into an early retirement, severely down on power, which is a real poor showing actually from Duracell. As you can see, the Williams this year is powered by a little battery at the top there. I was led to believe that Duracell was the most powerful alkali battery ever. That rabbit from the adverts must be talking nonsense. That being said though, I don't actually use Duracell batteries. I find it's actually cheaper to buy a nuclear power plant. Following that though, it was a fairly uneventful second half of the race. Oh, actually, before I forget, we do need to play Ocon penalty bingo again. Yeah, no more additions on Ocon penalty bingo this week after the 3 from the first race of the season. I think I'll have to drop this feature, to be honest. This is the slide that I reserved for discussing once again the fight for the win in this race. So we'll go through that now. Alonso briefly took P1 before Perez retook him a few laps later. The end. But actually, I think it is time to throw a little bit of respect onto Sergio Perez's name, so that's what we're going to do now. Because mostly, including me actually, people expected Verstappen after the safety car to gobble him and the 2 other drivers ahead of him for breakfast. But Perez maintained the gap fairly effortlessly, it has to be said. Ultimately though, for Red Bull, it was a race-winning margin of about 15 seconds. Christian Horner was right really to reserve judgment after Bahrain. It was too early to judge how fast the Red Bull was. It turns out it's even faster than we all thought. So they are absolutely streets ahead. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure how that's got there. But actually, I'm very glad that it has. Because it really was a clown show from the FIA after the checkered flag. Alonso, in third, is given a 10-second penalty after standing on the podium and about 45 minutes after the alleged incident because the jackman was touching the back of the car during his penalty. That relegated him down into 4th. So what do the rules say? Well, the rules say that a car that's stationary as a result of a penalty may not be worked on until the car has been stationary for the duration of the penalty. Now, I have to say, according to those rules, I am on the FIA's side with this one. Touching the car is working on the car, to my eyes. You know, it's certainly true that when I was at uni, if I touched my pen, I would consider that having worked on the essay and I needed to have a break. So the penalty was applied, George Russell got his podium, and we all lived happily ever after. Hang on a minute. Nope, that's not what happened. It was time for a game of P3 Hokey Cokey.
You put your
P3
in, you put your
P3
out, in, and shake it all about.
Aston Martin appealed based on the fact that touching does not necessarily mean working on, and cited 7 other examples teams have been touching the car whilst the penalty was being served. So this document was published, which in long words was basically, sorry, it turns out touching the car has never meant working on it. And Alonso was happily promoted back into 3rd place for his 100th podium. Incoming regulation change. Just time then for a look at our key learnings from Saudi Arabia. Firstly, our hopes of a title battle do rest with Perez or gastroenteritis. Secondly, the FIA Circus Act has truly returned, complete with face paint, wigs and big shoes. And lastly, don't buy Duracell batteries. That is all we've got time for on the webinar today. There was quite a lot to get in there, but I think we've just about managed it. We have kept to the strict